Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. I know evenings are not always the best times for some people, but that's what we decided to go with for this. So, my name is Shannon Sand. I'm an agricultural economist extension educator with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and I'm going to talk to you this evening about cash flows and cash flow budgeting. And I am going to ask for a little bit of grace with this because sometimes technology does not always want to work well. So, let me know if there are problems and we will work on getting things fixed. So can y'all see everything? Okay, great. Good to know. So, oh, thank you. I got thumbs up. I saw that. Okay. All right. So I'm going to talk to you about cash flows and cash flow budgeting, kind of why they're important, what makes them, tick, all that fun stuff. So, what is cash flows? Why it's important? How is it constructed? And then how can cash flows be used to make decisions? So, cash flow is basically the net amount of cash and cash equivalents being transferred in and out of the business or the operation. So, it's cash received represents inflows, while money spent represents outflows. So, you know, when you buy a new piece of equipment versus when you sell cattle, to have like cash inflows versus outflows. So, there are a few different types of cash flow. So there's operating cash flow, and this is going to refer to the net cash generated from normal operations, basically, in an actively growing and expanding company. A positive cash flow is required to maintain your growth. So, depending on where you are in your business cycle, whether you're in a point of expansion, you're trying to remain steady, or if you're at a point of contraction, all of that stuff, operating cash flow, right? Related to some of those things. Investing cash flow, this refers to the net cash flow or net cash generated from a company's investment related activities, such as if you're purchasing physical assets like equipment or property, or the sale of assets. So if you have grain in the bin, or again, if you're selling your cattle and it's just that time of year, or if you're looking at culling because of drought. So investing cash flow would be related to things like that. And then your financing cash flow refers specifically to how cash moves between the company and its investors or owners or creditors. So between owner, operator, manager, things like that. That's the net cash generated to finance the company and may include debt, equity, and dividend payments. So the cash flow can be used to establish loan repayment schedules that'll coincide with when revenue is coming into the operation. So this is really an important tool for both the farmer, rancher, and the lender. So it lets them know basically when is money coming in and out, and it can really help you set your schedule for kind of when bills are due. So I really look at it as like a key budgeting tool to use. So, especially throughout the year. So, you can use the information from the cash flow statement to determine if there are any potential liquidity problems. So, if the cash inflows are not enough to cover your business expenses and your operating loan is higher at the end of the time period than it was at the beginning, you have a liquidity problem. So, you can use the cash flow statement to determine which expenses can be adjusted to reduce the liquidity issue. I know we don't always like to look at uh, our input costs or our expenses, like where can we limit those? But as operators, that's oftentimes the area that is easiest for us to look at, like changing and cutting. Sometimes it's harder to make more money. We all wish we could, but it is easier for us to really look at those cash inflows and outflows and see where we can kind of cut expenses and where we can, try and hopefully adjust and fix any liquidity issues if we have those. And then using your cash flow statement in conjunction with your balance sheet and your income statement can be really useful way of determining your farm's financial situation. So cash flow versus profit, some people, they're related, but they're not the same. That's basically the best way I'll say it. So cash is constantly moving in and out of a business or our operation. So for example, when we purchase a new piece of equipment or some additional inventory, some cattle or something along those lines, our money is flowing out of our operation to whomever that supplier or retailer is. Or versus when we sell something, so let's say we are liquidating our cattle, it's just that time of year, we have calves to go, we have it's time to get rid of coal cows, or we have grain in the bin and the price is great. That is when we are receiving cash inflows from whoever we're selling to, whether that's the co-op or the elevator or the livestock market, or we have a contract or something like that. So that is a cash inflow. Paying workers, utility bills, those all represent cash outflows from the business towards whoever your debtor may be, things like that. Whereas profit is typically defined as the balance that remains when all of the business's operating expenses are subtracted from its revenues. So it's what's left when the books are balanced and expenses are subtracted from proceeds. So it's basically any cash we have, well, not really any cash, but it's any money we have left over after all of our bills have been paid. So, and your profit could be distributed to you, the owner, or the manager, or if you have shareholders, because some operations may, depending on how it's done, if it's like an LLC or a corporation. And those profits can also, which mostly is what happens, we reinvest those into the operation, right? So whether you're doing on-farm research and development, or you're investing in a new piece of equipment or a new piece of property, or maybe a new lease, something like that. So again, that's what profit can be used for and is oftentimes measured, or how it's measured, I should say. So like cash flow, profit can be depicted as either positive or negative. But when the calculation results in a negative number, it's typically referred to as a loss because the company spent more money than they made. So I'm going to go over what's not included in a cash flow before we go over what's included, because what's not included is much less than what's actually included. So what the cash flow budget is not is the same as an income statement, especially an accrual income statement. So they are very, very different, in fact. So the cash flow budget does not include things like depreciation, inventory changes. So it doesn't include like when we have inventory changes, and it does not include changes in your accounts receivable and payable. So what's included? Like I said, it's a lot more is included in it. So the cash flow budget does include things like principal payments, cash payments for capital assets, and new loan proceeds. So when we get our new operating note at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, whenever you have it set up, that's technically considered a cash inflow, right? So an operator can easily cash flow very easily for a while by just selling a few cows or pieces of machinery, a couple acres of land, or just allowing your accounts to continue to build. So I don't ever know if anyone can tell or not, because I haven't lived in the South for a while, but I'm born and raised from a farm and ranch in the South. And there is a joke that we have a lot of small cow-calf operations, my family included, so I feel like I can definitely joke about this. But there is a joke in the South that basically if you need a new air conditioner or water heater and you have cattle, you will sell in order to pay for it. That is a way to cash flow, but it's not necessarily the best way to do it, right? So you can cash flow the budget, you see a positive, but that doesn't always mean profitability, right? So, or vice versa. So the cash flow budget is not a substitute for that enterprise budget. The enterprise budget will include things like depreciation and opportunity costs, both of which are non-cash items and not found on the cash flow budget. So we have things, like I said, we have our cash inflow from our operations. We have capital asset sales. So if we sold land, or if we had to sell a couple of extra cows that we didn't plan on to pay for that air conditioner or whatever that may be. Plus we have non-farm sources of income, which should be included if they're used to pay the farm bills. So I kind of want to stress this because I think a lot of us have off-farm jobs, and those are definitely used oftentimes to supplement in lean years. So do not forget counting those when you do your cash flow if you need to, right? So your cash outflows from your operation. So what are you spending money on? We got insurance, We got fertilizer, we got fuel, we got labor. There's a lot of stuff. Any capital asset purchases that you've made. So non-farm outflows of cash. And I specifically wrote in here, including family living, because that is one that people often forget to include in their cash flow. But hopefully if you're paying yourself labor, a wage, a salary, you may not need to include that, but otherwise you do need to include that family living, because that there is a cost to maintain living. And in the past few years, let's be honest, it's all gone up. So any debt you're servicing, any notes, any loans, anything like that. And then you have any new borrowing. So like I've said before, when you get your new operating note for the beginning of the year, all of this together adds up to give you a net cash flow. So the cash flow budget is a plan of how cash will be coming into the operation and leaving it. So when's it coming in? When's it going out? So the key word is cash. So if cash is not entering or leaving your pocket, then it does not go on the cash flow budget. The cash flow budget provides three primary values for the operator, either the farm manager or the operator owner. The first one I really like personally as a planner. I was like, and I know not everybody enjoys this, right? We like planning vacation. We don't necessarily like planning finance stuff. So I get it. It's not always the most fun, but it does force the planning function of management. It provides a means of communication, communicating the amount of the time and the timing of financial needs to yourself, the owner, the managers, any investors, lenders, things like that. So it really allows you to go in and make it look like you have all your ducks in a row, because I've looked at this. This is when this is due. This is when this is coming in and going out. And it just gives you an overall better view of your operation and allows you to better communicate that to your lender if you need to. And then during times of low profitability, it can be used as a survival strategy. Like I said, you don't want to talk about having to sell an extra couple of cows, or if you have that grain in the bin when the prices are low, but sometimes we got to do what we got to do. But it also allows us to really look at it and see, do we need to transfer some of this debt if it's really high, and if the interest rates are low, and depending on the market, and again, everybody's situation is going to be different. Do we need to transfer this to a longer term debt option? Things like that. Do we need to talk to our banker and see what our options are? Do we need to look at doing some alternative strategies, or like reducing our family living, or whatever we can do? So there are a lot of different ways to set up your cash flow. So you can do it monthly, you can do it quarterly, you can do it twice a year or biannual, or you can do an annual one. I'm going to go through a few different examples. I'm probably going to require a little bit of grace here because I do have Excel sheets to go through. So we will be going back and forth, and hopefully I can make this as smooth of a transition as possible for y'all. So here's an example of a quarterly cash flow. I pulled this from UNL from a few years ago. So it's just a quick sample quarterly cash flow budget. I'm going to go with the assumption the first quarter is January through March, April through June, so on and so forth through the end of December. Now, depending on your operation, you can set it up however you want. So if you're a cow-calf operation, sorry, I work a lot with cow-calf producers. If you're a cow-calf operation and your annual year really starts in May or April or whenever, you can change those quarters to whatever you need them to be. You just have to know that's what they are. So in this case, we have a beginning cash balance in the first quarter of $5,000. We have sales of crop products. We have sales of livestock products, any government payments, and that's our total inflow. And then we have that across each quarter. Then we got our cash expenditures, our cash outflows. So we got seed, fertilizer, feed, processing, marketing, any capital purchases, interest, debt payments, and then that gives us our total expenditures. And then at the very bottom of this, you'll see quarterly net cash flows and then the cumulative net cash flow. So again, a real quick and dirty and a simple one to do. So this is an example of an annual one. I really like this one. In this case, for 2023, I did some animation. So we are looking at estimating, we are estimating that we will have about 50,000 in revenue from sales of livestock, and we're debating about adding some additional fencing to our property, whether that's going to be feasible or not here. So I'm gonna try and switch this. So hold on just a second, y'all. Okay. I'm gonna hope this worked. So I'm gonna try and make it a little bit bigger so we can kind of talk about it. So this is one example of how we can use cash flows to really make some decisions in our operations. And I want to say I recognize these numbers are not realistic, but I just put them in because they were easy. So if you want to do realistic, send me an email. I'm happy to visit with you and we will get this done. So and go through it with you. So we are estimating our gross farm cash income is going to be 50,000 for the year. We're estimating our cash out is going to be about 40. Now we're looking at potentially buying some fencing. So let's say we've got sales of capital assets. I don't know what the capital asset was for $500. Maybe we sold a really old truck or a tire or something. Who knows? We did purchase some new machinery, equipment, and farm buildings, which would be our fencing. So fencing is very expensive at $10,000. Well, it's not that expensive, but in this operations case, we're going to say that. So we're looking at doing some financing. So we've got cash provided by financing activities. So we borrowed 100,000 to try and see if we can make this work. We've got principal payments of about $12,000. And then we have some non-farm activities. So that's non-farm cash invested in the farm business. So in this case, this is a small operation. They have off-farm income that helps to supplement theirs if needed. So, and then they said they withdrew about 75,000 for cash, for farm living, for family living, taxes and savings, and etc. And that seems pretty reasonable given the current cost of living, but we have about $5,000 cash on hand from the beginning of the year, and we're hoping to have 10,000. So our total cash in is 255,000 because we took out that loan to make sure we could pay for fencing and stuff. And then our total cash out was 147,000. So, well, if I can get my thing to go here. So you can pull from this whole statement of cash flows, right? You get your beginning cash balance of 5,000, what your income is minus your expenses. That gives you your cash provided by operating activities. Now, again, we're going to go with the assumption this is a pretty small operation. So, and then we've got sale of capital assets. We sold a couple of things or one thing or half a thing, whatever that may be. We sold some tires. Who knows? Maybe we have antique tractors. That's a thing. So we purchased some machinery, equipment, and farm buildings. Again, we were really looking at doing some fencing. Fencing is quite expensive, even at 10,000. I don't know how much fencing they got done, but that's a negative $9,500, which that's okay. Again, depending on our operational life cycle, we're going into a point of expansion. That's okay. So, and then we borrowed 100,000 because we wanted to make sure we had cash on hand to take care of all of this. And then we had a principal payment of 12,000 from previous loan. And then we have personal income of 100,000. We withdrew 75 again for that family living, income taxes, things like that. So we have 113,000 total provided by cash provided by financing activities. So we have a net change in 113,000, ending cash balance of 10,000, and then we have a discrepancy. Ideally, you want this to be zero. So kind of what we would do is go back here and look at our spending and be like, well, do we really need to borrow 100,000? Probably not. You know, if it's only 10 and we're doing okay, we don't really necessarily need to borrow $100,000 for 10,000 in fencing, right? Let's be honest. Now, I am a little risk averse personally, so I would probably potentially borrow more than the 10,000, but we could probably get away with considerably less because we have that off-farm operation or off-farm job that provides, you know, additional activities. So again, we're still making money either way, so we're doing okay this year, but you know, it's not always the case. So Let me go back to this now. Okay. Can y'all see everything okay? I'm hoping. Okay. So this is where we were last. So here's an example of an annual cash flow. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
All
Is
right,
it
hey
not
Shannon,
showing? No,
we
you're
see
fine.
your presenter view if you want to swap that.
Aha. Okay, that's good to know. I will fix that.
Perfect, thanks.
No, thank you. Sometimes technology does not do what we want it to do. Let's do this. Is it okay now?
Looks good.
Okay, great. So this is an annual cash flow. I pulled this from, I think, Illinois or Iowa. This is a very detailed cash flow statement. You put in a lot of things. It gives you a lot of additional information. I created this one just real quick this afternoon to play with it. As you can see, again, sometimes your projected is going to be a loss in certain areas, and that's okay. Again, depending on where we are in our business cycle, that's acceptable. Not all of the time and not every year, which I think we all know, but sometimes that's okay. So this is just an example of an annual one. This is a very detailed annual one. You can add a lot to it again. And I think that's the thing with the cash flows. You can go as deep as you want, or you can go really light-handed with it and, take your time. So here's an example of another monthly one, and I'm going to attempt to pull this one up as well. I really like this one. This is just a really simple one that you fill out yourself. Okay, let me see. I'm going to try and make this a little bigger because I don't know about y'all, but sometimes I have a hard time seeing. So anything in yellow, you create your own inputs and outputs. I started making this. I just went with cattle sales, coal sales. You can do grain sales. Anything else you think is a potential inflow. So we can do like off farm income. You don't have to, obviously, but you can include whatever you want. Any asset sales, sales of assets you think you're going to have. I also started working on cash outflows here. So we have feed, vet, labor, fencing. It could be, I didn't include things like fuel, seed, fertilizer. I don't know. I mean, it could be a ton of stuff. Insurance. Maybe we have crop insurance. Let's be specific here. Oh, and then if we do something like LRP or whatever, we can include that as well. So if we're looking at our sales, like our grain sales, I'm thinking corn. So I'm thinking December corn right now, to be honest. I think a lot of people are harvesting right now. So let's say maybe you sell now, but you don't get your check till December 1. Let's say that. So again, your cash inflow is going to be, I don't know. I'm going to make up a number, y'all. So don't give me too hard a time. So let's say you got $100,000 in sales. So, and you can calculate that out. So if, again, let's say you got, ooh, I don't know. If you contracted that, you probably did okay, but let's say you did 10,000 bushels. So let's say we had way more than that. I'm going to add another zero. Let's see what happens. Okay. So let's say we sold 100,000 bushels at 560 a bushel. So we got 560,000 in December. But that's what we think we're going to get. So let's say, I don't know. Coal sales can happen any time of the year, depending on when you're calving and if you have a fall or a spring herd. Oh, let's say you sell calves October, November. Oh, I'm going to do October since we're getting paid in December for the other one. And usually with calf sales, you get those pretty quick. So say we got calf sales were pretty good this last year, you know? So let's say we were really good. So I'm just gonna round up and say we're gonna say you got $1,000 for like 500, 550 weight calves. So I know again these are not realistic numbers, but probably could be more than that depending on the calf. So let's say you got $1,000 and you had 100 head you were selling off because your main operation is grain, maybe. So you got 100,000 in sales from that. And then I don't know. Did we have any culls this year? Yeah. Let's say we get off farm income. Someone gets $2,500 a month. They have a part-time off farm job. It gives us health insurance, all those wonderful things in life, retirement, all those things. So, and let's say that's every month. So they have an annual income of 30,000. So that gives us, you can kind of see again, it'll give you your cash inflows for every month. So I love this one. It's really a simple one to use. And if anybody'd like it, I'll happily send it to them. So, and then you get your annual total here, and that's 690. So for our outflows, and I know I'm missing stuff, so but we're trying to I'm trying to be proficient with this, but we'll see. Sometimes that doesn't work. So let's say we had the vet out in January for whatever reason. I don't know, $25 a head. I don't know what they were doing, but let's say they looked at 100. And then we had feed costs. Maybe we had to buy some supplementation for them. Like, we might have to do more then. Maybe we'll do more these months. Maybe that's when they need it most. So again, it depends on your herd. And then your labor, we have $1,000 in January on average. Let's just say it's $1,000 in on average every month. It's because we can make that quick. Fencing. No, I'm not going to do fencing then if I can avoid it personally. Maybe in June. And maybe we had to do some here, some repair work or something. Fuel, I feel like, is a cost you get like almost every month or so, depending again, or if you have a large fuel tank, sometimes those, you know, maybe your cows are further away for a couple of months, you know. You have some pasture here, so maybe then it's less money you're spending. Who knows? So, although this is next. I'm gonna say um, maybe we have something going on here. Maybe it drops down for whatever reason. You know, we're done with harvesting and looking at cows. We don't have to go as far. Who knows? Seed. So now, although you could pre buy this and then that's a whole other worksheet prepaying stuff. So let's say it's 3,500. I don't know. And then say at the time we buy 2,500 in fertilizer, and then we decide we'll get crop insurance Let's say our crop insurance is also 2,500 just to keep the math easy for us, right? So we can look at all of our cash outflows and we can see kind of, again, this is a really great planning tool. So you can see when things are negative and when you're basically going to be cash flush. So obviously kind of January, February, May, June, looks like July, August, September here. In general, you're running a negative. But like October, November, December, and like this is definitely a positive cash flow, so that's not an issue, which is nice. But so this is just a nice way to go through and kind of look at all of your different cash inflows and cash outflows and how to set those up and use those in order to help you make some decisions. Ooh. So there are a few different ways to measure. So the measures from the cash flow statement, I really like this. So the cash flow statement provides a lot of information on your repayment capacity. So your repayment capacity is going to show the borrower your ability to basically repay debts on time. So that's the big thing. So again, when we were looking at that cash flow previously, it showed you where you had negatives and positives. And again, depending on how you set that up, if you're cash flush from the previous year, you're able to meet those obligations. So that's really, I think, a key takeaway to help with is it really does help you figure out when you can meet those obligations and how you can meet those. It includes non-farm income, and as such is not a measure of the business performance alone. So basically some recommended repayment capacity things that you can look at. And again, I'm happy to give you copies of all of these if you want to calculate out these yourself. Or if you need help with it, again, just give me a call, send me an email. The debt coverage ratio, it indicates whether your business generated enough income to cover your current interest expense and all of your intermediate and long-term debt payments. So again, depending on the year, I was like, I've worked through some lean years and some different operations and stuff. And I was like, sometimes it's really difficult if the market's not great, we've got to really look at how can we structure and look at, can we cover all of our debt? Replacement coverage ratio. So a ratio of less than 1 indicates that you did not generate enough income to cover debt payments and unfunded capital purchases. Thank you, Ryan, for putting my email address in there. Yeah, happy to answer emails if y'all have questions about this. Term debt and finance lease coverage ratio indicates whether your business generated enough income to cover all of your, again, intermediate and long-term debt payments. In this case, a ratio of less than 1, the business, depending on it indicates that there is a potential that you may need to liquidate some inventories or run open accounts or borrow additional funds or sell some assets to make scheduled payments. So not fun stuff, but I can tell you my family's operation at certain times, some of these things do have to happen. Sometimes they don't, and you can get by in lean years, but sometimes you have to do these things. So this is what's called the Farm Financial Scorecard. I don't know how many people have seen this before or not. It's actually created by the Farm Financial Standards Council. It's a group of bankers, government agencies, universities, and other nonprofits. And basically, they're all finance nerds who get together and kind of discuss what are kind of optimal ratios and basically red is stop. It means we really need to look at this. It's vulnerable. Green is strong. And then yellow means you're kind of in the middle of the road. And I do want to say, don't freak out if you have some things in red or yellow. If you go to calculate these, again, depending on where you are in your business, whether you're at a point of expansion or contraction, sometimes it's going to be red because you're at a point of expansion. But the goal is, and the hope is you'll pay it off. So, again, breathe through this. Don't freak out if you ever go and calculate some of these and they're red. It's fine. So a lot of these ratios are actually what is used by your banker. And I want to say this, every banker I've met uses a different set of these ratios, but they will all pull from these, and there are 21. They used to be called the Sweet 16 back in the day. Yes, I'm old enough to remember that when I was part of that, and they expanded it to 21. But what we're really going to focus on looking at is repayment capacity again, because that has more to do with cash flow tonight. If you're interested in learning more about the rest of this, let me know. Happy to talk to you about it. So, again, the repayment capacity, this is how you calculate it if you're interested in that. So I'll leave this up for a minute. So if you want to do that, you can kind of screenshot some of these. If you look at all the Excel sheets and everything we've gone through tonight, all of these things are within that cash flow budget. So your repayment and replacement capacity divided by your total debt repayment is your debt coverage ratio. And again, that just tells you, can you meet your obligations? Your replacement coverage ratio, repayment and replacement capacity is going to be divided by your total debt repayment plus your unfunded capital expenditures. Your term debt and finance lease coverage ratio is your term debt repayment and replacement capacity divided by the total principal and interest on term debt and finance leases. So again, sorry, y'all. These do give you a really good idea on, can I meet my financial obligations? And that's, like I said, the really nice thing with this cash flow and cash flow budgeting is it really can tell you kind of, what point in the business cycle you're at. So like I said, these can be used to really help make like decisions within your operation. And depending on what sort of, if you're using a software for your record keeping, like QuickBooks, you can auto pull some cash flows, which is really fabulous as far as I'm concerned. I'm a big fan of QuickBooks and Quicken, to be honest. Quicken is a little more difficult to pull the cash flows, but there's kind of some like workaround stuff you can do to do it. But QuickBooks is a really nice one. The nice thing with these cash flows and cash flow budgeting, it really does help you to monitor and control your cash outflows and inflows. It can really help to plan for the budgeting and your cash needs throughout the year, because for all of us, it's very different. I mean, we're going into November and December. It's holiday time, it's family time. My cash needs in those months are very different than mine in February, March, and April. I don't know about y'all, but like, again, cash flows are really useful for help in planning. And then it can help identify potential ways to more efficiently time your payments. So if you have a really big payment coming out in, let's say, January, but you get most of your money in November, maybe talk to your lender and come with your cash flow and say, hey, is there any way we can figure out how to make this more optimal so that we can get everything repaid in a timely manner, or whatever works best? So it can also kind of help tell you, can I repay my bills? I was like, again, you look at the bottom of the previous Excel sheet we talked about, we did have months where it was red, but overall we were in the black. So we were doing good. We were in the green. So, but I was like, the nice thing is these really can help you for better planning. So like I said, if you're a big planner like me, it's like, they're really nice ways to plan out, okay, I've got this bill due here. So I was like, I know I need to save for like, from like October, November, December, so I can meet my January obligation. So, and again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. This is my contact information if you'd like to get a hold of me. I know Ryan put my information in the chat, but yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer those. Know this was a lot of information and a lot to absorb in a short amount of time. So it's okay if you don't have any questions, or if you'd like to contact me later, I'd be happy to answer. So someone asked, other than Quicken or QuickBooks, is there another program that you would recommend? Otherwise use Excel sheets. Yeah, you can use Excel sheets. You can use Google Sheets. I know there's Easy Farm, and I forgot the other name. There's several that are specifically for agriculture. The reason I like QuickBooks is because they do actually have an ag option. Now you need to go in and modify it because it's very generic. But yeah, I I teach a lot of Quicken and QuickBooks, so that's why I like it. Yeah, if you want the simple cash flow form, I'm happy to email it to you. Just send me an email, or I can give it to Ryan and he can email it out to everyone who registered tomorrow, I believe. Is that correct, Ryan? I don't want to say things that are wrong.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and put the address where the recording will be available tomorrow in the chat.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, but I'm happy to send you an email with all of the information. I always in all of my PowerPoints, I make PDFs and I include oh, if I can get there, links to all my references and basically everything I use, but I have downloads of all of these and I'm more than happy to email them to you. So yes, I can send you the information. Like I said, just send me an email. And I think Ryan put that in the chat. So yeah. But there's not to go back to the original question, but there's a ton of different software available depending on what you want and what you're willing to spend. So QuickBooks is very expensive now, by the way, because it is subscription based. Quicken, I think you can get it fairly, I think it's like $70 for the year. So and I forgot how much I haven't checked on Easy Farm in about 4 years, to be honest, but I know it was a very popular one that was used by back when I worked at South Dakota State by Mitchell Tech and a lot of those. So it was a popular one. But there's a bunch of different ones that are out there. So yeah. And yeah, I'm happy to send anybody any of these cash flow forms you want. You just send me an email and I'll get them out to you. All right. Yes, I can send out the scorecard and the repayment capacity as well. And again, if y'all have any questions on how to calculate those, just let me know. So yeah, I think I got all the questions. Okay. So I think that's it. Thank you all so much. I really do we have one more? Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And if y'all have any questions, please feel free to email me or give me a call. I do a lot with this, so I would be happy to help.